Hello, everybody. This is Final Draft, and welcome to EFR Presents The Interview with Josh Haber. Welcome, Josh.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
Okay, so I just wanted to start off with a very general question, which is, what's your background in writing? Because you're screenwriter for My Little Pony: Friendship is Magic, but that doesn't just come out of nowhere. How did you get started in the writing industry?
The writing industry? Gosh, I kind of feel like I'm still starting in the writing industry. I went to film school at USC here in Los Angeles. My original intention was to be a film director. I was going to be Steven Spielberg.
It could happen.
Yeah, sure, right? It didn't.
Yet.
So, yeah, exactly. So far, to this point, it hasn't happened. But, I'm still holding out hope. I kicked around in a bunch of different jobs. I worked in development and television for a while at HBO, and I fell into I moved out of feature film stuff and into television stuff. And once I was sort of working in television, I kind of realized that most of the creative force behind television comes from the writing side. And so I decided to kind of shift my focus and really concentrate on writing. So I left HBO, started just trying to work full-time writing with day jobs here and there. I sold a little web series to Sony. I forget what the name of the company was at the time. All the digital production companies have changed names like 17 times since then. But it was like Sony Pictures Television Digital or something. And I sold them a web series, and me and a partner wrote the pilot, and we shot a presentation, and they were like, great, and they paid us, and then they shelved it. And it was kind of fun. It was like sort of like a sci-fi Harry Potter kind of thing. It was cool. And from there, a friend of mine who now works at Hasbro had been getting into animation, which I had always, he's always been in animation, but he'd been sort of moving up from like assistant level to director level to vice president. He's sort of an executive superstar at this point. And he had said, well, why don't you try writing for animation? Because I could probably get scripts to people for you. And so I did. I wrote a bunch of specs. Gosh, I don't even remember. I wrote a Clone Wars spec, and I forget the name of the show. It was a Batman show. It was so cool.
Was it Batman Beyond, perhaps?
I don't think it was Batman Beyond. It was
I hear so cool in Batman and show and cartoon, and then that's the image that came to mind.
I think it was like there was like a show before Batman Beyond.
Well, there was Batman the Animated Series, which was legendary, and then
and it was after that one. I remember that one. I had a friend who actually I have a few friends who are storyboard artists, and I have a friend who worked on that show.
Oh, wow. And, that was one of in my opinion, that was a really groundbreaking program.
So cool. Like the way the look of that show was so simple and easy to execute, but so like evocative and clear and awesome.
Oh, yeah. And the writing on that show was just phenomenal.
Totally.
It redefined some of those characters. But you mentioned a few minutes ago that you had worked on HBO. Was it on a similar kind of sci-fi type project, or was it just?
No. I worked for an executive. I worked for HBO, the cable channel. And
okay.
I worked for the woman who was in charge of drama series, and so HBO is sort of I actually don't have a frame of reference, but at HBO it was sort of unique to TV in that they were like a studio and a network and production company all in one. So everything came through our office. What attracted my attention was all the sort of deal memos to the writers who were getting paid exorbitant amounts of money. And I was like, hey, that looks like a good gig. Maybe I should go after that. But like I said, everything came through that office. We approved the Sopranos cookbook. It was like It was a fun job, but ultimately I decided
pasta, red sauce, exactly. Pasta, red wine, and then more pasta.
Exactly, and guns.
and guns.
But ultimately I decided I didn't want to be an executive, and that's why I left that. So that's how I got into animation. I wrote some specs, and this friend of mine passed them along, and I ended up getting a few interested parties, and I ended up on Kaijudo, and I worked on there for 2 seasons. And from there, I was already at Hasbro, and I met Megan, and we hit it off, and then I started writing on Pony.
So you wrote several episodes for Kaijudo, and you've written a few episodes for My Little Pony. Did you find there are any similarities between writing for both of those programs, since both are Hasbro Hub productions?
No. Not because they're Hasbro or Hub productions. I mean, obviously there are similarities because they're both animated. So there's a sensibility that they share in the way that you write, sort of from a visual standpoint. But strictly speaking, Kaijudo is what they call boys action, which means it's written for a demographic of, I don't even know, 5 to 9 year old boys who go to play Magic the Gathering or something. Actually, I think Kaijudo is a primer for Magic the Gathering. Because obviously Hasbro is a toy company, and so they sell a card game that Kaijudo the series is sort of the backstory for.
I think it might be tied in with Duel Masters.
That's what it is. Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. Duel Masters, and yeah, that's what it is. Kaijudo Rise of the Duel Masters. That's the name of the show. So that's a very different arena than Pony, even though they both ostensibly are to sell toys. Kaijudo is a boys action show, and My Little Pony, even though it's for girls, supposedly, is a comedy. So it's sort of like an action show versus a comedy show, and they don't really share a lot. Kaijudo is more about the action. You spend a lot of time choreographing the fight scenes. You spend a lot of time figuring out where characters are in relation to other characters so that they can display their awesome powers, in the best possible light. And My Little Pony is really about characters talking to each other. It's just about well-developed characters interacting.
Well, and I was going to say, too, M.A. Larson has described My Little Pony as a sitcom. He says that the best episodes are written where you take two characters who are polar opposites and throw them into a circumstance with each other.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I saw something recently. There was somebody on Twitter who was talking about My Little Pony's similarities to Community.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they're saying like Twilight Sparkle is Jeff Winger, and because you always have that. I don't think
she's as much of a jock as he is, perchance. But
no, but there was that thing at the end of the episode where Jeff calls everybody together and gives a speech on what they've learned. It's like I mean, there were some valid points, let's say.
Oh man, I love that show. I mean, what makes I think Community and MLP work so well is that it's an ensemble cast with really defined characters. That have some depth to them. When you write episodes of a show, for you, do you find that you, specifically in this case, My Little Pony, do you find that you write the episodes almost from a character standpoint or more from a story standpoint? And maybe that those two standpoints are too defining, but I mean, when you are approaching a script, do you look at it like, how am I going to make these characters interact, or are you looking more at the overarching story of it?
It's weird because I'm really of two minds. When I'm conceptualizing a story or when I have an idea and I'm pitching it to Megan, it's always from a story standpoint. That's just how my brain works at the inception of the story. I think very plotty, and I'm a terrible pitcher. And when I try to convey what the story is, it always sort of falls flat because it ends up being this exercise in plot, which for whatever reason are the ideas that first occur to me. But during the actual process of writing, when I'm in the script, it's always character. I'm rarely paying attention to what the story is supposed to be, and I just sort of put the two characters in a situation and have them talk to each other, and it just sort of plays out.
Would you say then that the process for you of writing a script is to create a framework with the overarching story and then to fill in the details with the characterization?
Yeah, I suppose that's what it is. Although usually when I start off with my sort of very plot-heavy idea that I pitch to someone else says, okay, that's good, but what are the characters doing and how are they feeling about this situation? And I don't really have an answer until I start writing the story, because for whatever reason, I have a very difficult time verbalizing character needs in a story format. It's such an organic process to me that I'm not really aware of it. So it's very difficult for me to pitch it as a story. I don't pitch a story that says Rarity finds herself in a situation that challenges who she is on this level because of such and such. I think of a giant rock falls down a hill and someone has to get out of the way because the rock is actually a person. I get into these weird plot things. But then once I actually start writing the story, the only thing I'm paying attention to is who the characters are and how they're reacting to a situation, which I think the fact that I've been successful in any way is a testament to how well-defined and specific the characters in My Little Pony are. Because in any good show, like Mitch is in a sitcom, if you have these really clear characters you just throw them into an awkward situation and just watch the sparks fly. And that's just ends up being how I write. And it's a really organic process that I have trouble describing even to my boss.
Well, in our episode review of Castle Mania, you had said that you were handed the script, that basically, well, not the script itself, but the story to write it. What is that interaction like between you and Megan and the writing team? How much would you say is stuff that you're bringing to the table? How much of it is we need this to occur in an episode?
Well, in every season there are, and on every show, not just in My Little Pony, but there's always network or studio or production company asks, I guess, or mandates, things that have to be done for whatever reason it is. I'm sure on a feature level, people deal with this all the time when they say, well, Doritos paid for 30% of the budget, so you have to write a scene where the characters really like Doritos. So there's always that's an extreme circumstance, but there's always going to be some sort of thing that you have to do if someone is paying you money to do it.
I think Colbert did that with the Doritos. There was at least a season where he was just constantly eating Doritos on screen.
Right.
Then again, he's shameless overall, but yeah.
The best is when you can sort of take something like that and turn it on its ear and really make something out of it that is self-aware and cool and still serves your financial master. Those are the best. So with regards to the story for Castlemania, I wouldn't so much say that I was handed the story. We knew that we had to write a story where the gang ends up using the castle as their clubhouse, and we had to establish the journal. And those were really the only two things. We had to sort of establish the castle of the two sisters, and we had to establish the journal. Beyond that, the rest of it was just sort of came about as a process of the writers back and forth discussing various ideas on what would be a great way to do that. Yeah, I wouldn't say I was handed the story so much as there's always specific items within the season that you have to handle.
Well, going back to the characterization of the show, do you have a character on My Little Pony that you enjoy writing for more than the others?
I mean, I've definitely gone on record talking about Rarity. I think in every interview I've done so far, Rarity is very easy for me to write for. I don't know if it's because I'm vain, but there's just something about her. I was thinking about this the other day, because before I said she's just so specific, and it's not that she's just sort of a superficial bimbo. I think it's really what it is about Rarity that's so cool is that she is self-aware. She has this, I don't know how to describe it, this sort of rich girl thing, but she's totally aware of what her deal is. She doesn't hide it. She doesn't pretend to be something other than she is. And she knows that she has these issues, but she embraces them. And I think on a certain level is probably, I don't know if it's come up yet, but is probably really able to make fun of herself for the kinds of things that we call superficial.
I would say in your episode that's aired so far, the Castlemania episode, that where she's yelling at the castle the whole time. I mean, that was one of my favorite elements of the episode. That was such a Rarity thing to do, to chide the castle for being so disagreeable.
Yeah, she's just trying to help, too.
Mm-hmm. She's just trying to help. She's just trying to refurbish this castle and, the indignancy or whatever. But, okay, well, then I'm going to ask the flip of that question, though. Do you have a character that's really difficult to write for? And I've heard a few writers say it's Fluttershy for them.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I really enjoy writing for Fluttershy. I think she's a blast to write, because Fluttershy is that perfect thing where... And it's come out in several of the Fluttershy-focused episodes, oh, God, what's the one where there's that giant bull that's trying to... The Minotaur, who's the personal trainer kind of.
Yeah, that's putting your hoof down. That's
can't remember the character's name.
Iron Will.
Iron Will, yes.
Yeah.
That episode is the perfect example of why Fluttershy for me is easy to write for, because yes, she's shy and meek and she's always apologizing for everything that she does, but it's sort of like still waters. Underneath, there's a lot of stuff going on.
A lot of that's kind of implied.
Yeah. So if you enjoy passive-aggressive people, writing for Fluttershy is perfect.
Well, so is there a character then for you in this show or in Kaijudo or any other thing that you've written that was particularly difficult for you to write, or challenging, I should say?
On MLP, I think it's kind of difficult to write for, say, the CMCs, because it's not that they aren't well established. I don't have as great a handle on the specificity of Apple Bloom versus Applejack or Scootaloo versus Rainbow Dash. Sweetie Belle seems to have her own thing going on, but I don't know. I feel like those guys would be hard to write for. Maybe I just haven't seen enough of them yet. And I also feel like maybe Spike is a little hard to write for. Although there are some things that it's easy to sort of key in on him. His crush on Rarity, his sort of, admiration of Twilight Sparkle. There are some things to write. There's some things to key in on him with. Celestia, let's just say that's impossible. Really hard to write for because she's not really a character. She's a deity.
I've heard someone refer to her more as, that she's more of like an ethereal mentor type character. And Lauren Faust has said in interviews that she does not look at Celestia as a god in the world. But at the same rate, I imagine she's hard to write for because she is so powerful.
And she has everything figured out. That's sort of it's hard to write for a fully self-actualized character. It's hard to write for a character who doesn't have any flaws. So the stuff that's interesting is that sort of flashback stuff from the first couple of episodes of this season, where you're sort of seeing her as a younger pony and dealing with her sister's stuff. I mean, that's sort of where her character sort of shines, where she has to sort of make these tough calls about what to do with Nightmare Moon. But yeah, on a week-to-week basis, both Celestia and Luna are difficult to write for because they just sort of come off as being, and now they come in and say the moral, so it's sort of, it's hard to write for them as characters instead of just sort of props.
Well, in the episode review, you also mentioned that for character references, etc., you've poked around on YouTube and you've looked around on the internet for...
Constantly.
So I imagine in that process, you've stumbled across your fair share of fan creations. And I was wondering if that's the case, if there's anything that particularly stood out to you.
Well, yes, there is one thing in particular, but I want to address something before I talk about that, which is I'm constantly combing the internet for stuff. But most of the time, what I'm looking for specifically is I have a situation in mind that I'm writing, and I need to see or hear the characters talking about something similar so I can hear their voice in my head and continue with the scene. Mm-hmm. So it's usually not the case that fan-generated stuff will help me with that because...
It's usually kind of goofy.
Yeah, it's goofy or it's just not quite, the tone isn't quite right. It's not the show, Mm-hmm. The fan stuff is its own thing and takes on a life of its own. But the show is just a very sort of small part of the world. And when I'm writing, I can only sort of pay attention to that small part.
Absolutely.
So, now, in terms of probably my favorite fan thing in existence is that series of shorts. They're crazy, off the wall. God, it's sort of this Ren and Stimpy kind of vibe.
It's the Dot Move series.
Yeah.
I bet, like Fluttershy Shed and all that.
Yeah, the Shed. Yeah. Oh my God. That's
hot.
Some of the most amazing stuff I've ever seen for any show ever.
Ashley Ball has actually said that that's some of her favorite stuff too. And Hot Diggity Demon's a really cool guy. Yeah, that stuff is really popular.
If I ever go to a convention, I will wear a Rarity is Watching You shirt the entire time, and I will never take it off.
So you hear that, Hot Diggity Demon. Go to a convention where Josh Haber shows up.
I'm going to buy one of those shirts off of his site because he deserves as much money as I can send him.
I saw him at Animate Miami earlier this year, and he was doing a panel, and somebody walked up and asked him a question, said, "Are you a brony?" He said, I like brownies, but I wouldn't say that I am one. That's just his sense of humor.
Good stuff.
Well, actually, then kind of taking another step back here, I mean, you are writing for season 4 here. And by the time that season 4 started getting written for, which was about a year ago, the Brony community was pretty well established and the show staff knew about it. So yes. My question is, what was your first encounter with the Brony community, possibly before you were hired on to write for My Little Pony? And what was your first honest impression of what you saw? Because it is kind of weird.
I didn't really have any interaction personally. One of my coworkers, one of my friends, Natasha Levinger, who also writes on the show, she had an interaction because she had accidentally, because she's sort of a comedian. She's improv actor and comedian and writer. And she has a Twitter account that she writes crazy, funny stuff on. And at one point, she happened to mention that she had gotten the job to work on My Little Pony. And this was well before anyone had been given the okay to talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
And so her Twitter account blew up from people saying, oh, there's a new writer. Who is she? Who is this person? Do we trust her? What's going on? And she kind of freaked out because she didn't know what, she had never heard of the fan base really. And I had sort of heard in passing, but I didn't know the extent of it at all. And so she was freaking out because she thought she was going to get fired because she had like spilled the beans before she had been given permission to. And it ended up being just fine. But she was astounded at how quickly her work experience had been sifted through by the Brony community to determine whether or not she was worthy of writing on the show.
Well, coming from the fandom perspective, I think that there are a lot of Bronies out there that definitely are that kind of, they're very anal retentive. But I think for the most part, they're forgiving. They're more happy to see that there's more content being produced.
Mm-hmm.
So far, it seems like, and I know this from the show staff I've interviewed before too, that the people working on the show really care about it. The people writing for it, the people composing for it, storyboarding, all of that they care about it. So when new people are brought on, I think they're trying to maybe affirm that, oh, this person here is now writing for our beloved show, that hopefully they're carrying that tradition of attention to detail, what have you. I think that's where they're coming from.
And I understand the process. I mean, I am a fan of things. And the things that I am a fan of, I want the people who make them to do a good job. Like, I absolutely get that 100%. But, you know, like, yeah, I don't think we really knew the full extent of it until we were knee deep in it. And once I actually got the job on My Little Pony, obviously, I'm a writer. I try to write on as many things as possible. And My Little Pony is one of the shows that I work on, and I'm constantly interviewing to work on other shows. But when I got the job on My Little Pony, basically the subject of every interview from that point on was always, so tell me about these bronies. What's up with them? I really didn't have an answer. I mean, other than, look, it's a serious, devoted fan base. Beyond that, I don't know. It's sort of like a cocktail conversation piece, you know?
It's definitely a novelty.
Yeah, but like I said, I'm a fan of things. I understand what it's like to be a fan of things.
Well, so now there was a year between when you wrote this episode, Castlemania, and the other episodes that they'll be coming out for season 4, and when you became more publicly recognized for working on the show. Did you have this year then where you were maybe prepping for your inevitable encounter with the bronies? Or
Actually, you know what? I was actually kind of impatient. I was like, when can I out myself to the bronies? Because this is like, it's killing me. I've written this thing a year ago and nobody knows about it.
So then the show airs and your Twitter blows up.
It did. It did, mostly to the positive, which is great.
Do you find that you now have a new second job of maintaining that? Because I know in my case, Twitter is kind of like a second job almost.
Absolutely. I was a very early adopter of Twitter. I was one of the first people on it, and it always kind of upset me that some people became immensely popular on it and some people didn't. And so, you know, I'd always longed for Twitter celebrity. But I kind of have to be in the right mood to tweet in an entertaining way. I used to be, I tweeted basically everything that I thought, and I quickly found out that I had to stop that. I'm still pretty free and loose with it. And I definitely consider my audience now more than I did before.
I mean, I imagine that as a writer for the show, that you have almost a potential where anything you tweet could be misconstrued as canon for the show. I mean, especially with a rabid fan base like that.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't concern myself so much with that because I don't feel like my job would be in jeopardy if that were to happen. If I were to tweet some spoiler or something, that would be a different story. But I'm more concerned myself with my sort of general tone on Twitter. And I've definitely I tend to kind of push the envelope comedy-wise and tonally. And I think that can be off-putting to some of the fan base of My Little Pony. And I hope that people don't discount me because I come off a little adult in my Twitter, feed.
I think that this fandom, if anything, is more than accustomed to off-putting humor. I think they know quite a bit about it, actually. Well, before I wrap this up, I do want to ask what I've called the evil question in the past. It's been a while since I've asked this, so listeners will know what I'm about to ask you. But my evil question for you is, if you could have the fandom produce something, art or some sort of fan fiction, I don't even know, piece of music, if you could have the fandom produce something, what would it be? Because some listeners might actually do that. And that's why it's called the evil question.
Yeah, gosh, I don't know. I've already had someone do a pony version of myself.
Oh, yeah. That's part of the process. That your OC is a big part of it.
And I don't know where they got their reference material. I guess probably pictures of me are available somewhere. But they probably had to mine my Facebook page somehow. Gosh,
Was it a pretty accurate pony version?
Well, I mean, it was still a pony. So...
But they got the hooves right then.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. They got the mane perfectly. It didn't not look like me. Gosh, I don't know. You know what? Honestly, like if there were, because this was just a sketch, but if there were a really well rendered version of the Me Pony, like the vinyl doll of that would be awesome. But that's just my ego going.
Well, I'll say this, just for your own fandom reference in the future. That pony version of yourself is what the fans call an OC, an original creation, or original character. So that's your OC, not Orange County, but that's your OC, that pony there. So there you go. You now have
very cool
internet speak that you can use, and I bet if you put out there that you're looking for a figurine custom OC...
it would appear.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, do you have any plans to maybe attend some of the conventions coming up next year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally open to it if the opportunities present themselves. I'm up for it entirely. But, at the same time, I'm a little nervous because I totally want to go to all this stuff, but I kind of don't want to. I was a little hesitant because as soon as my episode aired, it was sort of like, this is the third interview that I've done, and I kind of am worried about inundating the fan community with me, and I don't want people to grow tired of me, and like, oh, there's that guy again.
Well, I mean, there's quite a clear track record of fascination with the show staff. I mean, there have been writing panels at most of the major conventions. And you look at Amy King Rogers, for example, she's been writing since the first season, and she's still a celebrated guest at a lot of these events. I wouldn't be too worried about that.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I am open to it. I just don't want to wear out my welcome, I guess.
Oh, it's going to be hard to do that. Very welcoming. We're odd that way.
That's good. Oh, side note. I went to high school with Amy Keating Rogers.
Oh, you did?
I did.
Did you go to school with Jason Bateman, too?
Did she say he was at our high school?
She said that he was at, I know at least her middle school, and I thought that she said it went through high school. Yeah, I don't know. I thought that she said that he went to high school, too, but I might be wrong.
It's possible. Our school, which is called Chaminade, which is obviously in Southern California, there's a high school and then there's a middle school. So maybe he went to the middle school and didn't actually join us at the high school.
I don't know.
Might be that, but yeah, I was actually really good friends with her younger brother, and I remember because we did musical theater, and after a production of Once Upon a Mattress, I remember having like a cast party at her house, and her mom made chicken wings.
That's awesome.
But I had no idea she was working on the show or that she even wrote in animation at all. In fact, my wife, totally unrelated. My wife went to Occidental College where Amy went and knew her from Occidental College. And we went to a little party my wife said, hey, some friends of mine from college are having a party. Let's go. I went to the party and I was sort of wandering through the house. And in a picture over the mantle of the fireplace, I was like, hey, why is your friend from college in this picture with my friend from high school? And we walked out and she was like, wait, you know my brother? And I was like, hold on, Amy? It was very weird. And then I found out that she worked in animation, and totally random years later, we both ended up on My Little Pony together. It's kind of funny.
The fates conspired. There was thunder or some sort of atmospheric disturbance.
Something
happened.
Clearly forces are at work to make My Little Pony as good as possible.
And now that's canon. Well, anyway, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure. And this is definitely not going to be your last interview, I'm sure. And, best of luck to the upcoming con season, because it's going to be crazy.
I hope so. I'm ready for it. I mean, mostly I'm excited about what is the one in Baltimore. Is it BronyCon?
Yeah.
Because I have family in Baltimore, so it'd be the perfect excuse for me to go back and visit them.
Well, Josh Haber is a new writer for season 4 of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. Thanks so much for being with me.
Oh, I had a great time. Thank you.
And this has been Final Draft, and stay tuned to EFR Presents for more interviews coming soon.